And I think we are live. Good evening, all, and welcome to Chris's Patriotic Talk. I'm going to be your host for this evening as Chris is away. I believe he's gone to Macedonia. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Seems to be all
Yeah,
over
it
the
is.
place these days. And we've got a most welcome guest, Mr. Yerbury. How are you this evening, Alek?
I'm very good, very good. How are you? Sorry, I've got my cup of tea here with me.
Always need a cup of tea. I'm very well, thank you. As usual, quite busy, but some very positive advancements happening at this point in time. Mostly with organisations that are being set up, but people have heard enough from myself. So tonight we're going to focus on you. I mean, you've
No problem.
made a prominent presence in nationalism recently with your speeches and demonstrations. What are your thoughts on the attention you've been getting? I've seen you've had another article written about yourself in, I think it's called the Northern Scot.
Yeah, I've seen that. However, they've well, I say made the mistake from their point of view. Maybe it is. I don't care. They've put the actual flyer for the demonstration in the article, which is really good, and I'm never going to criticize that because it's free advertising.
Yeah.
But yeah, since the beginning of this year, there's been a lot of really positive things. I mean, that off the back of that first large demonstration in Hull, what's happened is we've been able to sustain that and keep some kind of momentum. So we've gone from there to Seacroft to Skegness to God, I forget them all, but there's been we've been to Lincoln, we've been back to Skegness, we've got Leeds coming up. We're then going back to Lincoln. I know there's things planned all throughout the summer, but what is crucial about this, and it's something that maybe hasn't happened in 5 to 10 years. It probably hasn't happened since the EDL was quite large. And again, forget the politics of it. It's just the objective facts of it. It's getting to the point where, at least in this part of the country, we can consistently pull in enough people, whether it's people from that area or whether it's people from a wider community. We can pull in enough people that the events can't be shut down. And it's getting to the point now where we aren't necessarily limited strictly to protesting against a specific thing in a specific place. What we can do now is we can start proactively getting a platform and proactively pushing for certain policies, certain ideas in a way that couldn't really happen over the past few years.
Yes,
Oh,
I've noticed there has been a lot of grassroots momentum. What do you think's driving that?
I think part of it is a simmering problem. Part of it is the fact that the problems are consistently getting worse and consistently being ignored. Oh, by the way, just before I go any further, what is the policy on with this regarding questions? Do you want them answered as we get them, or do we want them?
So
Do we
I have
want
been
them
looking
at
at
the
some
end?
of the questions, and good evening, all. I can see some welcome messages as well. What I was going to do is because really both of us are quite busy. We've probably only got an hour, so we're planning to end this around 8 p.m. Was I was going to ask you some questions that I think most nationalists would probably want answering, just to get some insight into your thinking, your plans, your background, and what you think the solutions for making nationalism successful and being able to implement some sort of successful change looks like in your mind and vision. But also, I'll try and leave around 15 minutes towards the end where I'll go through these questions that the audience are asking and see if I can pick some out and put them forward to you. Does that sound okay? Is that
Yeah,
something I can
that's
agree to?
totally fine.
Okay, fantastic.
So,
So, continue.
no, I was trying to remember where I was, but you carry on.
We were talking about the recent momentum in nationalism and how we think that's coming about. I mean, it is quite, how can you put it, morale boosting, of course. But when you look at these demonstrations, it's still quite far behind how nationalism is in the past. I mean, you look at like the marches that the National Front did, or you go back to the days of Oswald Mosley. Do you think there is going to be a resurgence of that sort of kind? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, the short answer, yes. But the long answer, there's another reason why I think that in the last few months, there's been success in certain places that maybe hasn't happened previously. Well, I say previously within the last few years. So, myself and a lot of the people that have been organizing these events and participating in these events, something that we've been very conscious of is, let's say you go to something like this and you're being trusted with a platform in front of a large number of people who want to hear what you've got to say. What I've been doing is I put the politics out of my mind, I put the ideology out of my mind. What I do, and I said this even in a post on my channel today, the thing that I am most interested in is simply demonstrating to the people there that I'm not going to lie to them, I'm not going to deceive them, and that if they trust me, that trust will not be abused. And the people that I've been doing these events with have approached it with the exact same mentality. And as a consequence of that, because people have given you their trust and it has not been abused, they are then more than willing to listen to any ideological suggestion you might make to them. And for good reason, because if you can demonstrate that you're capable of being honest, because this is the one thing that nobody has been getting for years or even decades from the entire political spectrum. This is the one thing that people don't get. They don't get honesty. This is why so many people disengage with elections. This is why so many people disengage with Parliament. It's for that reason only. It's not the politics, And this is something I've said before as well. Is nationalist politics. A lot of the things that we talk about, a lot of the things that we advocate for, those things were never unpopular. The politics was never the issue. The issue was the way in which people were trying to push them forward. That is what was causing people not to. That was what was causing people not to engage. And since we've thought, right, the politics is important, but it's the second most important thing. The most important thing is demonstrating honesty and loyalty. That's when we've started to have success. And that's when we've noticed we can do an event and then 2-3 weeks later, people will come back instead of resenting you.
I think some really interesting points there. I mean, it should go without saying that people don't like to be manipulated, lied to, and deceived. But it seems to be the way in politics, doesn't it? It's what's expected of our mainstream political parties. I mean, they'll tell you they want to get immigration under control and then start importing immigrants in record figures. So I think many peoples in normal society have completely disengaged with politics as a whole. You can see this with the amount of people that go out to vote. Very few people bother to do so now because they feel that it's pointless. All politicians are liars.
I mean, I correctly predicted that the local election turnout would be terrible. It's always been terrible, and this is something that I've actually talked about as well. And I think I've talked about it with yourself before and some others. Is that people seem to engage less with local politics than they do with national politics, not more. And I know there's been this really big push in the last year or two with this sort of local community politics approach. The real world evidence suggests that the more local the issue, the less people engage with it. And the ultimate proof of that is the fact that so few people engage in local elections compared to general elections. Now, a lot of the issues people have that people will actually sort of bother to vote for, those issues are all national issues. So that is something else I've noticed, and that's again something else we're trying to do with these events is yes, we're going to focus on an issue that is affecting that specific area, but, and this is the crucial thing, it always has to be addressed within the context of the national problem. You know, we can't have what we can't do is unintentionally promote NIMBY behavior, because that's something that can actually that can actually happen. Sorry, I'm just removing a couple of trolls. Okay, carry on.
So when it comes to local politics and NIMBY behaviour, have you not noticed how many peoples didn't really mind how certain areas of our country, our local native communities, were being made vulnerable, persecuted minorities, like in our capital city, for instance? And they were quite happy for so-called refugees to be dumped in certain areas. But when it started happening to nice little white market towns that had previously not had these immigration problems, it became a more local issue and they started to care about it a bit more. I mean, maybe that's a bit unfair because really the primary issue in most of the national elections that have taken place, and indeed in the referendum, was surrounding immigration. But often when something threatens a local community, particularly things like house prices, it really does seem to motivate people. But yes, the NIMBY behavior is very divisive. I think I've seen it throughout your posts where there have been certain manipulative actors who will play both sides, and they like to play off people against certain areas. Oh, it's okay. We won't dump these refugees, foreign invasive peoples in Skegness. We'll dump them here instead.
Oh no,
And then we get the two areas warring between themselves.
Yeah, but see that is the trap that is constituency politics. I will not engage with constituency politics. The things that we do, we specifically avoid constituency politics. Take Lincolnshire as a perfect example of this. So, with regards to the issue with RAF Scampton, it was of no surprise to me when the government began pushing the idea that Scampton was the solution to Skegness. It was no surprise to me because they know that both areas have a problem, and the intention is that both of those sets of people will then attack each other to basically argue over who gets the garbage in their patch. That is a very real strategy, and that's why I know the left always like to talk about solidarity. They always like to talk about solidarity, but solidarity is actually the only thing that is going to help. We have to fight this problem from a national perspective. Forget about what's happening in your local village, in your local town, all this stuff. You have to fight it nationally or not at all. Solidarity does work. If you fight for yourself, you lose. If you fight for the person next to you, you both win.
I completely agree. I mean, this nation is our collective home and it is being overrun and defiled, and it affects us all. So you probably learnt that from your military background, that particular saying. It was probably part of your training or ethos.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's something I've always believed. It's something I've always believed anyway. But I think the army just confirmed a lot that I already suspected was true anyway.
So I saw you posting about the Lee Rigby event, and obviously we've been talking about your demos and these other events that you've been holding where you've been speaking. And I was thinking, what do you think about the marching bands? I know it was something that you yourself it was something that you were wishing to do with your demonstrations. Do you think that it assists in bringing about a sense of cohesion within a community? And what do you think of these sort of Ulster marching bands that you see in Northern Ireland?
I think they're brilliant. I know Nick Griffin's talked about this. I think it was in the stream with yourself.
It was.
But with these bands, what it does is it turns the event into a spectacle. It creates a form of entertainment. And if you can create, and that sounds really silly, But so I'm trying to admin various
Things
comments.
as you're going along.
I'm trying to just put people who are trolling so they can't send endless comments, but it doesn't seem to be working. It just seems to ban people. Well, is what it is. Anyway,
just let the trolls talk. Don't think it actually bothers anybody. It's pretty routine on the internet, isn't it?
Oh, I'll leave it then. Anyway, what it does is it gives people a form of spectacle, and much sort of, for a good example is we're not at the point yet where we've got a band. We're not. We might be, but we're not. We might be in future. But when you can do something that is visually nice, or something which has some sort of visual appeal, like a marching band going down the street, what you will get is you will get people who, regardless of what their opinion is of what's being pushed, or regardless of what their opinion is of the politics, they will come purely for the entertainment value of what you're doing. And once they're there, you've then got an audience. And once you've got an audience, you've then got that opportunity to actually speak to the audience and engage with the audience. And this is why, if it's an audience of people that aren't all going to be totally politically in agreement with you, you have to come back to what I was saying before, where the first thing you have to push is just the fact that you're not going to lie to people and that you're capable of being trusted. So on to your original question, I like the marching bands. It's something we should have. It's why we should make a conscious effort to try and attract the likes of ex-military people to nationalist movements, especially nationalist street movements, because a lot of them will bring these kind of skills with them, which they will already have. And you're talking about Lee Rigby, something I do want to touch on, and it was something that I put a post on my channel about. I was horrified and disgusted when I saw people in nationalist chats slating Lee Rigby, spitting on his memory, claiming, well, he was an agent of the establishment, he deserved what he got, X, Y, Z. As far as I'm concerned, if you are not pro-military, if you think the military is evil, you are never ever going to get anywhere as a nationalist, because regardless of whether you think it's right or whether you think it's wrong, the sort of people who are attracted to the military, by and large, tend to be people who are reasonably patriotic, reasonably brave, but they're certainly not going to be cowardly, reasonably able to take care of themselves, and reasonably able to engage in controlled aggression. Now, those are the exact kind of people that you need to be bringing into a movement. And if you're going to vilify and antagonize those people, then you've got no hope.
I think when it comes to the military, I think like all other sort of state institutions, there is a sense of mistrust with nationalists. I think it's very difficult for nationalists because they do wish to be patriotic. They want to support their military, but many see our military now as being controlled by our enemy. I know the Ministry of Defense try and push a lot of this woke nonsense. They've started with the sort of anti-racism training. We've seen the RAF, they don't want to employ any more white men. And we've also seen it with the sort of feminist agendas. And I know that they're probably not very popular with the average soldier. Every person that I've met that's come out the military doesn't really agree with the state and is appalled with it. But I think that's where it comes from. But anybody that was, defiling the name of Lee Rigby or saying anything like along the lines like he deserved it, that is absolutely appalling. You've got to understand that just like us as a people, we're not responsible for what our corrupt state does. And the soldiers that are in our military are certainly not responsible for the decisions that our state makes or the Ministry of Defense. And I think the military is made up of very good people, from what I've seen as a whole. And the veterans groups are a very large part of the nationalist movement. They're not peoples that you'd wish to alienate. They're peoples who strongly believe in the defense of our nation and the continuation of our peoples. So it's a shame that there are some in nationalism whose hatred for the state will go so far to condemn any person who's ever worked within it in any sort of capacity,
Yeah,
like
but the
Rigby, for instance.
yeah, but the problem with that, and that sort of gets me onto something else that I'm in, I'm aware of, and it's something I'm moving away from, and I encourage other people to move away from it if they think they're going into it. Is there is such a thing as self marginalization, and what I mean by this is that sometimes if you go through life with the belief that you are some sort of dissident, insurgent, person against the system, if you go through life with that belief, and I'm not saying that belief is right or wrong, but if you make that belief central to your existence, the problem that you can sometimes get is that you can then engage in behavior based upon how you think a dissident should behave, which leads you to then be treated more and more as a dissident. And it becomes a positive feedback cycle that's very, very hard to get out of. And these kinds of people who, whose solution to society not being the way they want it to be is to totally marginalize themselves from it, that is the worst possible thing that you can do. And the reason why is because however powerless you think you are in society, whether it's because of your politics, whether it's because you're racist, whatever it is, however powerless you think you are, if you disengage from that society and make yourself totally separate from it to the point where that society has no need of you anymore, you will be even more powerless than you've ever been, because from that point on, you are, that society doesn't need you for anything, so it can dispose of you as it pleases. Whereas if you actually engage in it, that is how you actually have the ability to influence it. So the advice I would sort of give to people is just be mindful that you're not in that cycle where your belief that you are marginalized is causing you to marginalize yourself.
Almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm going to be persecuted, so I'm going to act in a manner of a persecuted person, therefore fulfilling the prophecy.
It's the same as what, if you go back centuries, that's what used to happen with people accused of witchcraft. Person gets accused of witchcraft, person then becomes socially secluded, person then behaves in a way which makes them strange or makes them appear odd or different, is perhaps very suspicious of everybody else. That then leads to more persecution, more suspicion, and then before you know it, they're being burned. That is a thing, and I've seen it happen personally to people. Even in 18 months, I've watched people go into that spiral. But it's something that I can tell has happened to a lot of people in nationalism.
Yeah, I think I've witnessed it happen myself, particularly when people. No, we won't go down that line because it could lead to a discussion that I don't think would be advantageous at this time. But yes, it tends to happen when people join nationalism and get this idea that they are dissidents. And like you say, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where they marginalize themselves. Quite often they alienate themselves from their friends, their family, their colleagues, and then they become completely reliant upon whatever group it is, whether it's a Telegram group or an in real life group, for their sort of social support, and become more and more marginalized as things go on. In some ways, there can be purity spiraling to the extent where even nationalists will alienate themselves from other nationalists.
Yeah.
But yes, what I want to ask you about next was something that you were talking about previously when you were saying we're not quite at the stage of getting bans and things. And I've seen that, you've held a few events, of varying sort of successes. They've been a bit hit and miss. Some of them have been very well attended and got some great media coverage, and others not so much. And I've seen you've released an organization, the National Support Detachment. How's that going? And what are the plans for that?
So Firstly, it is precisely what it says on the tin. It is a support organisation. What I've done, along with some of my colleagues, is we've created a framework for individuals from different backgrounds, by which I mean different group backgrounds, to work together without having to necessarily sacrifice their identity with regards to what they're already doing. And so far, that is actually working. It's worked to the point where now we're able to get a platform in Yorkshire, we're able to get a platform in Lincolnshire. Um, I expect that within the next 2 months, that platform will then be available in the Midlands and East Anglia, potentially as well in Scotland. Uh, Now, this is all being done in anticipation of future things. But what it overcomes and what it has enabled us to overcome is that very real problem of if you cannot communicate with the public, you cannot ever promote your ideas. And the inevitable problem that any nationalist entity faces is the likes of the unions, the likes of the hard left, opposing just about anything you do. So if you can't reliably mobilize a large enough number of people who, even if they don't completely agree with everything you're saying, they are broadly in agreement with the principles that you're putting out. If you can't get those people to effectively give you a platform, you're never going to get one. Now, so far, we've been able to do that. I haven't gone into sort of full scale open recruitment for the NSD yet, and there's a few reasons why I haven't done that. What I don't want to do is put myself in a position where I'm consuming too much of my time and effort doing admin for forces and resources that I can't actually do anything with. There's not really much point in me. There's not really much point in me having one individual in 10 different counties. I can't really do anything with that. What I've got to do is let it get to the point where I can effectively consecrate something with 5 to 10 people in a county, and then that can grow from there. So at the moment, there's a lot of in areas where I can reliably concentrate some degree of manpower. I can manage that. Places like Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, etc. Places where I can't do that, it's a case of getting it to that point, and that is all done. It's done privately. That is something that is organised. Whether it's by going to someone's event, speaking to a few people, and then discussing what can be done. That's not done by creating big public events. But I've got to put it out now. So some of these events that I've been going to over the last few months, they aren't all my events, and I'm not going to claim that they are. Some of them are events organised by colleagues I work with frequently. For example, the one in Leeds on the 10th of June, that isn't my event. I'm just helping the organizer, and I've been invited to that. But most of these events are ones that I and the people I work with have been invited to, and that's not a bad thing at all. I regard that as a good thing, because that is something that can only happen if people know that you are not going to backstab them. If they know that your intentions are genuine, that's when people will actually trust you enough to do that.
Well, I do think people recognise that it can be quite difficult, even if a local community would like to stage a demonstration of sorts, to sometimes be able to get that platform, because, as you say, the unions bus in the hard left, they get Antifa and some of their loony, Socialist Workers' Party paid activists to come out in force, and they start shouting and screaming, and it makes it very difficult to then conduct your protest in the manner that you would like to. We've seen on many occasions, actually, that people who were planning demonstrations have had to cancel them altogether, or they really have been heavily outnumbered. And it's not by peoples from the local community. These are peoples who are being brought in by organizations supporting far left extremists. And it seems that the unions are having a big part in that. And that's something that you've been talking about recently. I mean, I've been in politics for quite some time, and I had realized that the unions are quite heavily Marxist. But I hadn't actually made that whole link between them and certain extremist groups like Antifa, for example, and other groups that go and protest anybody who, well, stands up against anything, like, let's say, the grooming of children and drag queen story hour, a hotel that's going to be housing hundreds of foreign fighting age men in a local community. Those sorts of protests are always demonstrated. Even 15-minute cities have been counter protested by Antifa. So we know that they're a growing menace across our country, and it makes it very difficult for anybody else to be able to get a voice. What do you think the likeliness is of people coming together in the wider nationalist, in the wider freedom and truth movements to subdue this enemy that we all share, which makes it very difficult for us to even voice our concerns in our democracy?
Right. What I will say is, if something is rooted in individualism, it's never going to work. It has to be rooted in collectivism for it to work. A lot of people think that group mentality is a dirty word. Group mentality is not a dirty word. Group mentality is the thing that needs to happen, because what group mentality does is it creates a situation where if you're stood in a crowd of 100 people, and you know that every other person in that crowd of people thinks the same things that you do, you will start to lose the fear to say what you really think, because you know that everybody else in that group backs you up. There's no consequences or repercussions on you as an individual, because you know that other people are stood beside you, and you know that those people have your back. That is what group mentality does, and that is why it is so important to do it. You cannot build any sort of cohesion or any kind of countermeasure to the current system of things with anything that is rooted in individualism, anything that is rooted in liberalism. And these things are guaranteed to fail, because they fundamentally encourage people to think about themselves as individuals. You have to see yourself as part of a group. Once you start to take the view of the world that the value of a human being is their value to other people, and once you start to take the view of the world that it doesn't matter what one person can or can't do, it doesn't matter uh, whether one person lives or dies. What matters is what happens to the group of people as a whole. It's races of people, nations of people that matter. And you have to get this mentality into people. I know there's been all of these demonstrations against 15-minute cities. I know there's been the freedom movements. I know there's been the truther movements. Now, a lot of the things in there I agree with. Some I don't. A lot of it I do. Now, a lot of the things that we say, those people agree with. Some of what we say they might not agree with. However, you've got to ask yourself, why is it that, say, in Oxford, you could have that massive demonstration, perfectly organized. The amount of effort that went into it was colossal and commendable. With, I think it was over 1,000 people turned up to that, and yet the Oxford Council went ahead with the 15-minute cities anyway, because they clearly felt that as big as that demonstration was, there was no threat. Why did they not feel that it was a threat? There's a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it was not directly targeting the political entities responsible. So those entities did not feel threatened. But secondly, and this was the most crucial point, they did not feel threatened because they know that those 1,000 people came there with an individually driven mentality. Now, it doesn't mean those people are bad at all. No, on the contrary, they're very good. But because the whole idea was centered around individual liberty, individual freedom, what you get is you get this preconceived mentality of individual freedom, individual thinking, individualism. And something like a council is fully aware that you could have 10,000 people, but 10,000 people acting in their own personal interest are never ever going to be able to do anything against just 10 people on a council who are acting as a cohesive group. And that's why you've got to cultivate that group mentality in people. These movements, the truth movement, the anti-COVID, the freedom movement, those things will get results if they give up liberalism, if they give up individualism, if they give up the libertarian thinking, and they accept some sort of group mentality. In an instant, they will get results.
So with these demonstrations, like you say, there could be up to 10,000 people. Do you think that the demonstrations that you've been attending and holding yourself at this point hold any value? As most people in our society are individualists. Most people, even if they realize what the problem is, they think about, how am I going to make sure that it doesn't impact me? Quite a number of people think, if I run off to the countryside, somewhere that's mostly white, hopefully this won't all catch up with me at one stage, which of course it will, because they're planning to spread this plague of diversity to every inch of our country.
Do you know,
But people have an individualist mentality. It's one of the reasons why you can't get large numbers out in the streets, because people think, well, if I were to go to this and my employer was to find out, then I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. If they fire me, I might not be able to support my dependents. So, people are always worried about how their actions and how even their words are going to individually affect them. I mean, somebody's actually mentioned in the chat there about James Allchurch and Ashley. I can't pronounce his name. I'm just going to call it. Oh, I do know him.
Do you know, I'm going to say something else,
Ashley
and it's
Shaw.
to do, and it's I'm going to say something else, and it's to do with this. Go and build a fortress. Go off. Withdraw, build some sort of, white British fortress, or the sort of withdrawal method. I'm going to say something else, and some people aren't going to like this, but it has to be said anyway. A lot of these ideas about how the struggle is a multi-generational struggle, and instead of turning things around, what we need to do is go off and survive and then organize ourselves to come back in. I think that all of these ideas were created by people who simply wish to legitimize their own cowardice. I think these kind of ways of thinking came from people wanting to try and justify their own desire to run away. They didn't want to admit that that's what they did. So instead, they tried to find a way of justifying it by rationalizing it in their own mind and then rationalizing it to other people. That to me is what it is. People say, "Oh, there's no solution. There's no solution." No, the belief that there is no solution is the only thing that will cause there to be no solution. People have had bigger problems than this in the past. There are bigger issues. This country has faced bigger issues in the past coming from foreign powers. It's faced military invasions, and I know it's getting attacked now by an enemy within, but the belief that defeat is inevitable is the thing that causes inevitable defeat. People have got to get out of this mentality of, oh well, I will just go off, have multiple children, and then in 50 years' time they can sort it out, they can fix the problem. It is just cowardice, and I don't. I know that a lot of the people that do it, and a lot of the people that have been led to do that, probably don't see it that way. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm not saying they're bad, but their belief that the situation is hopeless is exactly what will cause the situation to become hopeless.
I obviously completely agree with that. I don't think that it's a be all and end all solution. This idea that, we can't figure out a solution now, so we'll leave it for future generations, when we know that the situation is progressively going to get worse. So we have a duty and responsibility as peoples to try and find a way. Now, I know that moving to the countryside is something that people want to do mostly for their safety, security, and sanity, because, well, living amongst the foreign occupiers can be rather exhausting. I get what you call foreigner fatigue. So I can understand if you really want to have full energy and be able to put yourself into your work in the way you would like, you might want to move out to the countryside. Or if you have children, you obviously don't want them growing up around the danger and dilapidation of the inner cities. But you can't kid yourself that that's an actual solution to our problems. It's not. It's an immediate solution to your own personal problem of being uncomfortable because of the foreigners immediately around you. But it's not a long-term solution to our overall problems of becoming a minority in our own country, of our wealth and power being handed over to these foreign invaders before our eyes.
I mean, the problem is that if you go and create one of these enclaves, and this is kind of the end result. And again, it's not a bad intention at all, but to go and create this enclave. The problem is that these enclaves, when people say let's go create a white enclave, these enclaves rely on the benevolence of your enemies in order to exist, and the benevolence of your enemies is never going to come. So really, you're just setting yourself up to be destroyed. And the fact that in the process of creating this enclave, you have totally disassociated from society, which means that society has no need for you and has no dependence on you. All you've effectively done is make yourself, instead of making yourself a hard target, you're actually the first people that are going to be targeted, because you're going to be people who have no friends, no allies, no connections to the outside world. So you're not going to be the last people to be victimized. You're going to be the first people to be victimized. Because if that was me and I had the power of the state and I had various enemies that I wish to destroy, the first ones that I'm going to destroy are the ones who are isolated, because they're easy pickings. And if what you've done is go and build an enclave in the wilderness that is totally isolated, you're easy pickings, and you've made yourself easy pickings.
Yeah, I do think that eventually it will lead to that, because these people will have very limited resources. Like I say, it's a short-term solution that gives you a little bit of comfort for a short amount of time, but really it's going to make you sitting ducks in the future, because your entire wealth, all of your weapons, your military, your police force, your government is going to be controlled by peoples who hate you. And as they've already stated, they don't wish to leave anywhere that's got too many white faces. No white farms, no white countryside. And look what they've done in South Africa. How has it worked out for the white farmers there? I know that there is small white communities that have been reasonably successful, but should the government decide that they'd like to wipe them out, there is very little that those communities could do. They'd be overrun. And it's out of care and not wishing to see that become our future why we talk about these things. We do have to have very serious discussions regarding solutions, because there's an awful lot of people within nationalism who believe in a particular solution, and they adhere to that one solution and believe that that one solution and that one solution alone is going to be sufficient to overcome the challenges that we face, whether it be an organization or a particular activity that people are going to undertake. And as you've said before, what we need is greater cohesion, really, because what we're going to need is multiple different kinds of operations. You can't just run off to the countryside and expect things just to get better, hear no, see no, and speak no evil, and pretend it doesn't exist, thinking it's not going to grow and come for you, is a delusion. And I think we are in a position where we can fight back. The enemy wants you to think that it's hopeless, but it certainly is not. Otherwise, they wouldn't be putting so much effort into trying to ensure that we don't collectivize. But we are collectivizing. We are organizing like we haven't done for generations. There is an awakening within white society that we as a peoples, as a collective peoples, are under attack. That is becoming even aware to the most, how can you put it? in denial of whites. You know, your average normie that watches the BBC, even they can see the anti-white bias and discrimination. They see these Pakistanis getting on TV talking about writing books of the last days of the white man. White man must pass over power. White people are responsible for all the evils. And what it's doing is driving a sense of collective persecution, which is bringing together our peoples, like I say, like they haven't been for generations. And I think that it is important that our peoples don't start to give up prematurely when we're on the cusp of bringing about something that we've not seen for a very long time, a collectivized, cohesive, and purposed community that has had enough of having their peoples taken advantage of, their
Well,
kindness taken for weakness.
we on that note, and what you're talking about, I know something we should probably discuss is various organizations working in conjunction with each other. You know, I said about, and we've said about how uh, at the moment I'm focusing on this street movement side of things. But and I have said this in a few forums now. Uh, I am in the process of dealing with the Electoral Commission. There is a political solution, and that political solution will be brought out as soon as I have concluded those dealings. I won't be doing it until I have done that, but people should be aware that this is something I am doing. And I'm going to get a lot of satisfaction when all the people that have insisted to me that it is guaranteed to fail and that it can't be done are going to be sat there looking at me when I say, right, it's been done.
Well, that's very exciting news. I think even if I try and push you, you're not going to elaborate further on that, are you? But
Well, I don't want to. I don't want to cause any issues. I'm aware that there can be issues if you advocate for something in the name of a political party and then somehow that's, you know, you've unintentionally advocated something that's against something that you've submitted in a document, etc. So to avoid those issues, I will wait until those uh, dealings are concluded. Then I will begin the process of launching that political party. But that will be coming. What I
fantastic.
will say is it will be a nationalist party based upon the principles of work, the principle of racial, social, and cultural unification, and the principles of a militarized society.
Hmm. Yeah, okay, I'm going to have to get you to elaborate on that end point there. What do you mean by a militarized society exactly? Because I don't think we've discussed that previously.
I mean a society in which what I would call a military work ethic or a military ethic is very common, i.e., uh, there will be there will be a focus on national solidarity, and everything will be driven by a collective view of the world.
More discipline, more, how can you put it? That the organization and sort of discipline that you would get from military training, is that something that you're trying to integrate into society or would like to see integrated into society as a whole? I have heard you speak previously about wishing for all young men to at least do 2 years.
Yes,
In the
I am in favour of national service, and I'm not interested in hearing stupid arguments about how well that serves global home. I'm not interested. The point is, uh, you will go in and you will come out of it with a knowledge of how to look after yourself, how to fight your enemies, and how to organize yourselves in a productive way. Those three things make it worth it. And if every young man in society does that, then as a whole society, you will not be so abused as what that we have been abused in the last years and decades.
You seem rather confident about there being a political solution. I've been involved in politics for quite some time as a director of a political party that once got 3.5 million votes in a general election and only returned one member of parliament. So we don't necessarily live in a democratic society, and many very talented and knowledgeable peoples have attempted such things previously. What do you think is going to be different this time round?
The fact that for the first time, it's not going to be politics before people. And what I mean by this is that it's people that matter, not ideology. It's not gonna be nationalism for the sake of nationalism. That isn't a thing. What it's going to be is nationalism for the sake of the population. That is something that I don't think people have really done or tried in this country for many, many years. You know, the ordinary person in the street is not ideologically driven. People don't have, people don't wake up thinking about ideologies. Most people don't engage with it. They don't care. They're not offended by hearing about it, but they just don't care. That is not how people think. What they think about is in terms of very, well, you'd say, a very simple things like, loyalty, trust. They think about tangible, practical things. You can't just sell people an ideology for its own sake. That's not something that I'm ever going to do. I never ever tell people to be nationalists for the sake of being nationalists.
I do think that there can be political solutions. I believe in a multiple operational strategy. I don't believe that political solutions alone will be sufficient. I do believe that we'll take many different kinds of operations, even with under the bracket of political solutions. Some of those might be street movements, some of those might be pressure groups,
just quickly,
some of those might actually be political parties. And yes, there is room for more than one nationalist political party. In fact, having a dual strategy often works quite well. Sorry, I was talking, then you wanted to bring up.
I wanted to, because you made that point you just made. I did see a comment had just come up from Clarence Boyce about that, and I really want to address that because I think it's important. Where he said nationalist party sounds great, however, where would that leave current nationalist parties? What I will say is, something that I've noticed for quite a while is there's a lot of mentality that nationalism is. Oh, I think Katie's dropped out. I'll carry on. There's a lot of view that nationalism is a closed pool, that it's a small pond with a limited number of people and a limited number of supporters. And I've been told that by a few people. I don't believe that's the case. I can't hear you. I don't believe that's the case. If you were to ask me, who are your potential supporters, my answer would be it's virtually every British person in Britain. That is a potential supporter. I'm not interested in taking supporters from other people. I'm not interested in going to another party and saying, oh, how do I get their supporters from them? I'm not interested in it because I don't need to do that. Nobody needs to do that. There are so many people that are wanting to engage. I'm not interested in becoming a big fish in a pond. What I'm interested in doing is making the pond bigger.
Well, that's a very, very good answer to that question. I was going to say we were supposed to start questions at 45 minutes past. We were going to leave 15 minutes for it, but we won't necessarily have time for that now. So I don't know if you've scrolled through and seen any questions that you particularly wish to answer. I'm going to have a quick look through and see if anything's been directed at myself and also at yourself. I know you've just answered one regarding where would it leave the British Democrats and such. And I completely agree as well. I think that there is more than enough room for multiple kinds of organizations, and people should stop focusing on this idea that it takes away support from their organization and focus on how we collaborate to actually expand that pool of support beyond what has become an echo chamber. Anyway, we'll go into the questions. I did see a couple pop up, but there's quite a lot coming through quite quickly there. Yes, I know I was muted. My entire screen went down. I could hear Alec, but I couldn't see anything. National services based. Something about women because they can't fight. The Nationalist Party one. Does Miss Fanning think it's a good idea to recolonize former British colonies? Well, I think that the living standards and the quality of life for the peoples who were colonized was significantly better whilst they were under colonization and British rule. Though I don't think that it was very beneficial for our people overall. You know, we spent an awful lot of money in places like Africa building their infrastructure, and they're not very grateful for it, are they? So no, I don't particularly wish to go and assist any more foreign peoples in any sort of manner. I would just like to remove them from our lands and send them back to where they came from, and then build a big wall to keep us separate for all eternity. Sorry.
Right, what other questions have we got? If anybody wishes to ask one, just somebody's asked, Katie, would you be up for protesting outside the Open University and take our idea into academia?
I certainly would. I did actually threaten to protest at one point about their clearly anti-white policies. I don't know whether that would be appropriate at this point in time, as I am engaged in litigation against the Open University, Fanning versus the OU. So I will try and, well, act as a legal professional team would, because I'm a litigant in person and representing myself in court. So in effect, I'm my own legal team. So I'll refrain from now from protesting. But there are a number of people who have been quite poorly treated by the Open University who have approached me about this, funnily enough. You're not alone out there. There seems to be an awful lot of ex-students and even occasionally ex-employees that seem to have been treated horrendously. I've seen that there's been a criminology professor who has said that she was treated like the racist uncle around the dinner table at Christmas because she didn't believe that men are women just because they identify as such. She was bullied by her colleagues, apparently. Yes, you can look that up. But I'll refrain from a protest outside the Open University at this stage. But it's a shame that I was deplatformed from that Students Against Tyranny event where we were talking about Marxism within universities and Marxist persecution and how prevalent it is within our universities and freedom of speech, of course. Anyway, I'll let another question be answered.
It's not a question, but something I've seen in a chat.
Can I answer that one? Katie, would you agree that Alek's army sweater doesn't look quite right without a shirt and collar beneath it? I think it looks good on him no matter how he wears it, personally.
Well, needs must. It's a weeknight after all.
Yeah, I don't think
somebody put a comment.
To be on camera. So he was. He asked me, "Are we going to be on camera?" And I said, "I think people prefer it when you are. Then they can see your sort of facial expressions and things. I mean, some people might prefer podcasts, but as a whole, I think people like to see you when you're talking." So I said, "Oh yeah, we're going to be on camera." So at the last minute, he's just had to press go. So he probably didn't have any time to get himself ready or anything. He's just appeared as he was. But yes.
I've seen from an Adam Scott, not a question, but he made a comment. He said, "This guy's party is going to be a flop." Now, it's funny when people say that, because would that be just like the Skegness March was going to be a failure, or just like the whole march was going to be a failure, or just like the Lincoln demo was going to be a failure? Well, is that what people mean when they say it's going to be a failure? Yeah, it's going to be a failure, like all those other things that certain people kept telling me would be a failure, but actually turned out to be the complete opposite.
Often I find a lot of people like to tell you that you will certainly fail because they don't even want to try, or they tried previously, made mistakes, and won't admit to their failures, and want to say that it just can't be done, and pretend that there weren't things along the way that they could have done better. The environment that we're going into, I believe, is one that will be ripe for discontent due to the fact that we're being subjugated, our rights are being stripped away, and our peoples are being purposefully eradicated. It would be absolutely quite normal for a society to start becoming quite agitated under those situations. I think that many peoples have tried very hard before. I've seen it with many political organizations, and it's no fault of the activists. Sometimes there are circumstances that are well beyond their control, but just because people have failed previously doesn't mean people are going to in the future. And this idea that you shouldn't even try at all is so defeatist. I mean, if you don't try, then you certainly have already accepted defeat. Even if you try and fail, at least you've actually done something that makes some sort of a difference. I mean, I'd rather try and fail than lie down and just accept defeat.
People underestimate what they are capable of.
They certainly
do.
do.
One of the worst things that has been done in an assault on our people is an assault on our people's morale. British people underestimate themselves, and I've seen it constantly, and I see it in nationalism. People believe that they can't fix these problems because they've forgotten what they're actually capable of, and they underestimate how good they actually are.
I mean, we have the blood of the biggest empire builders running through our veins. The majority of the people across the world speak our languages. Everybody knows who Great Britain are.
If this country had never achieved anything, then yes, they'd be justified in saying we're pieces of rubbish, we can't do anything. They'd be justified in saying that. If this country was a hovel that had never amounted to anything, they'd be right to think that. But it's not. It's the complete opposite.
I'm going to refrain from answering that one. Didn't you used to date non-white men in your younger years? No, I've not had a non-white boyfriend throughout my entire lifetime. I did have a few friends when I was younger that are non-white, a few colleagues. You know, I've even helped set up a political party for a mixed-race gentleman called John Lawrence. Isn't that terrible? But no, I've not had any black boyfriends at any stage. Bit of a weird question as well. But I'd imagine that you people are trying to just try and undermine
a weird question.
Who are more effective than yourselves.
Anyway, I think we both said we'd be on for about an hour, and then we had other things to attend to.
Yes, I've got to hold a quick meeting actually this evening. I'm going to be recruiting very soon for the Nest Hub education team. I need a curriculum committee and the creative development team. Now most of the planning has already been put in place. I just need to finish a few of the induction documents and we'll be ready to go. So I should imagine I'll be releasing a video about that next week. So that's what I'm off to do now. But one final point, I wanted to apologize to those viewers who were looking forward to watching this last week and it didn't take place. My apologies, that was due to me that got cancelled. I suddenly that afternoon had issues that I had to attend to with my proceedings against the former university. So that was more important at that time. So thank you so much for tuning in this evening. And my apologies for the short notice cancellation of last week.
No, well, we're here now, and it's been a good stream. One last question I'll answer because it's just popped up. Where Top Cat says we should look to the Spanish people and their Reconquista for inspiration. Does Alek like Spanish people? Probably my favorite Spaniard of the last 200 years was General Franco. So yes, I do like Spanish people.
Oh, good choice. Yes. So any final points that you would like to make this evening, Alek, before we call it?
Well, yes. Okay. Yes. I'll conclude by just listing something for real life activism. I will list the events that I'm aware of that are happening in sort of north of England, Scotland, and various events I'm personally tracking over the next couple of months. So the big one is the 10th of June in Leeds City Centre. On my Telegram channel, it's my name, Alek Yerbury. That has this all written down. June 10th, Leeds City Centre.
Oh,
June
that
the
one's due to
17th,
be good.
June the 17th, Elgin Town Square, and that's in Scotland, in Elgin. July the 1st, Bowthorpe in Norwich. July the 8th, Lincoln. July the 15th, there is likely to be an announcement within the next week or two of something that's going to be happening on July the 15th. And August the 5th, in Seacroft again, in Leeds. Now, there's also, since I wrote that list down, there is also now September the 2nd in London.
So a lot of activity there, and they can find that on your Telegram handle. Is that correct? On your Telegram page, Alek Yerbury?
Yeah, there's lots of places they can find that on things like Facebook, etc. as well. But I know that a lot of the audience is going to be Telegram based, so that's where you can. I've put out some posts with these consolidated lists.
Fantastic. I'm sure if anybody wants to ask you any further questions and wants to participate in any of those events, they will be able to message you through your Telegram.
Yes, please. If you're wanting to get involved in street movement style nationalist politics, please get in touch. If you're wanting to come to the events that I'm at, or if you want to help with anything that is being organised, I'm mainly in a position to facilitate that in Yorkshire and Lincolnshire at the moment. Other places, I can put you in touch with people who can help you. If you're a person that wants to organise some sort of event, I can do my best to put you in touch with people that are going to help you. I've been able to build a lot of contacts in the last few months, and a lot of these people, they really are looking for political solutions. They're not looking to be told that there isn't a political solution. They have the will to do it. They're just looking for people that can provide that solution to them. But as I said, yes, so if you want to get involved in street movement politics, please get in touch. If you are wanting to know a bit more or hear a bit more about the more politically based solutions, I'm not in a process to be able to engage with you much on that yet, but I am hoping to be within a matter of weeks. I know that a few people have contacted me now saying whether they could donate money, etc., etc. At this point in time, I am not in a position where I can properly receive and account for money. Therefore, that money is best spent in some other way that is practical to assist nationalism in whatever, in a way that you deem fit. When that situation changes, and that will probably be when I have a political party, then I will keep you informed. However, what I will say is, at the moment, time is more valuable than money. Time is worth so much more at the moment.
Your
So
sweat equity, your presence, your turning up, your skill sets, these things are much more valuable at this point in time.
Any person who comes to me and says, how can I help? I will find some way of putting your skills to use. And if I can't do it, then I will send you to somebody else who can. I know, Kate, you've got the White Indigenous Rights Alliance. Do you want to quickly talk about that before we finish?
Yeah, of course. I think I mentioned it briefly earlier. Of course, many of you are already aware about the White Indigenous Rights Alliance. Very complex organization, 4 divisions, and then 12 different departments, not including our commercial activities. We've mostly been focusing at this point in time in building the main content for the curriculum for the Nest Education Hub. But we're going to be trying to recruit for that in the near future. Mostly roles within our creative development team, voice actors, animators, although we will need some educators and we need some curriculum contributors for the 3 main subject areas of white history, white culture, and counter-critical race theory, and particularly researchers as well for counter-critical race theory, because, well, I just don't have the temperament to read through all that anti-white nonsense without my blood pressure going through the roof. So I would greatly appreciate the assistance of peoples who are much more patient when it comes to that. But I'll be releasing a recruitment video within the next few days. I'm just completing the volunteer handbook and assigning roles to my team of who's going to be doing the interviewing and who's going to be doing the supervising of new volunteers. But if you keep a watch out on my very censored channels, if you're interested, you will see that video coming out probably within the next 7 days. Otherwise, all of my projects have just been trudging on as they have been. I'm not due back in. Well, I'm due back in court for cost hearings and things like that. But I won't be expecting the trial for the case that people are most interested in until around January of next year. It could be as late as March. So it will be recruitment, which will be my next sort of activity that people will see me doing online.
Fantastic.
Indigenous Rights Alliance. But anyway, it's been fantastic having you on. And thank you very much to Chris for allowing us to use your channel here to be able to hold this discussion in a public domain. So
yes, thank you very much.
I hope you enjoy your holiday, and all of you who stream, who tuned into the stream, we thank you very much for attending.
Yeah, thank you very much to everybody who listened. I hope you found yourself agreeing with a lot of what you heard. In any case, even if you didn't, I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and I'll hopefully see a lot of you at various events.
At the 10th of June event in Leeds, it would be great to see some well-known faces there. Anyway, thank you very much, guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening. We're going to end the broadcast. Good night.
Bye.